And to begin with, you have to say that insofar as there's mutuality, it is a mutuality that comes, in our case, out of a jointly felt understanding, perhaps gleaned from previous experience, perhaps hard-won during those past excursions. That kinship is, while in and of itself desirable and inevitable and natural, something that exerts an exorbitant and significant weight on who you are, on what you think of yourself, on what your experience consists of. You're finding the matter and the day-to-day material that you have at your disposal and in your purview to observe. And that kinship can be rewarding and fulfilling on this basis insofar as it facilitates and involves and catalyzes much in the way of developing affinity, expanding an associative web all your own, in a sense, as in the group's belonging and possession. Material to work with, a web actively built and actively constructed in a multitude of subtle ways through a multitude of often subverbal feedback items and punctuations of speech. A web and a canon, entirely the groups, the small groups, which holds them together and brings them together, likely, no doubt, out of the promise and potential, subtly felt and intuited, that such a canon could be had there, and the canon that could be had there, and with these people, is superior in meaningful ways, though, again, ways not necessarily clearly articulable or definable or definite, superior, nevertheless, to the canons that could be had elsewhere, these alternative canons being and coming to constitute strange, unearthly hypotheticals, strange paralleling doctrines which each member of the group will then of necessity explore, but find themselves drawn back, for reasons of simple comfort and inertia, again and again. The canon they are working on and have already found themselves in the midst of, the canon of the group, which is a kind of language in and of itself, a system of emotional and intellectual vocabulary, a set of permissions and privileges and emotive authorizations better felt or more robustly received here than elsewhere. Yes, kinship, which makes unlivable things livable, which expands and broadens the terrain of our reality, and over which we are able to feasibly tremble, and in this sense broadens ourselves. Broadens the self, each of us in turn, hopefully, if it's working right and well and salubriously for all. And if everyone is essentially satisfied and happy and contented with the arrangement, even if, or perhaps especially when, the arrangement is not specifically delineated or has not been thoroughly negotiated or hashed out, broadens the self, expands the mind, creates this belongingness and non-coercive potential to inhabit places and times more deeply, more coherently, with less friction than one could ever really do on one's own. And there will be stressful situations on the horizon. There will be deadlines and due dates and compression zones and tests. There will be periods in which it would be expected and normal for the members of other groups to lose their heads and to stress out and to fall or collapse into their own neuroses and realize, each of their respective members, that this peer group, this support group they've gravitated toward, is paradoxically, in a sense, a lack of a support group, is, in a sense, limited, more limited than they thought. So we gravitate to and become a group of which there is little expectation, little formal requirement or assumption that we will help each other, really, or do any more than each of us can possibly do. Each of us responsible even now for catalyzing subtle interactions and helping interrogate that particular area, committing this particular set of facts and details more purposefully to memory, laying down this or that type of cerebral crust, planting flags, each of us, for the group, using our own signature here and there on this or that page, transcript, or document, inducing, providing, offering, eloquently or ineloquently, certain modes of punctuation in certain moments. When we are at our best, and perhaps there is no simpler way to arrive at it, no simpler manner in which to describe it than the proverbial one, that these are the people who allow us, each of us, to be our best selves, to have a greater volume of those moments that we acknowledge as being coherent to our person and representative of how we want to be. Each of us surviving in this institution, each of us avoiding the institutional capture and the blight of all-consuming neuralgia and suppressive protocol, the blight of being overwhelmed and inundated by things we are expected to tangle with entirely on our own, without help or keeping or incentive. We have already constellated and realized a motivational subgroup and locus, an island within ourselves, motivational exactly insofar as it permits us to express certain varieties of our idiosyncrasy, to show certain parts of our change, to illustrate, demonstrate, punctuate, and evoke, and touch upon certain folds, feathers, or interstices we happen to have gathered, or be tangling with or count among our pigeons of self-presentation, the pigeons of which we comprise our act, a certain quality and culture that accommodates some preening, albeit while thoroughly underrept, preening within the confines of an abiding and self-effacing modesty, a modesty that emerges out of manifest and felt uncertainty, uncertainty about what will come, uncertainty about how and if I or he or she or they or anyone will pass the coming hurdles, or even if this affinity group will survive their coming when they do. And yet there is a warmth there, and the warmth is soft and fragile, perhaps most of all because we do not know what to expect of each other, exactly because in us enshrined and preserved and elementalized is the tenor of an old and fabled tradition and mysterium, a tradition of being that much aloof, a tradition that warrants, credits, and takes into itself and esteems simple facts of mystery, simple facts of deep-level displacement from which all creativity and genuine feeling must inevitably spring, in respect for each other enough not to ask too many questions. Respect that stops at given rivers when the current seems tough going. Respect enough not to just forge on ahead. Respect because outcomes may be outcomes, but conduct is conduct, and somehow we know, the 5, 6, 7 of us, we all know that conduct is all we have, is all we can do, is all we can control. Conduct is all we can really say about or test of ourselves, push come to shove at the end of the day, with respect to ourselves and our own conscience and our own capacity for frivolity. Conduct, and the fact that we have never asked too much of each other, ourself, never taken what is not freely given, never implored after or invoked the existence of anything which was not clearly available on standing offer. This is strangely a free market community, the only free market community perhaps here expressed, and there is a certain pride in that. Oh yes, even beside the fragility, a pride in our diversity, in our understated diversity, a pride in the polarities we contain, a pride that we contain those polarities and evince them and wear them on our sleeves, and yet are not gulled by them, and do not find in them, or their existence, or their character, any cause for regret, any cause for retribution, anything that cannot be contained, anything that should be concealed, per se, or closed off. We know that the closing off is only foolish, and would only be a vanity. We know that meaning must be given vent, and so each of us must act as maintenance people in the boiler room, as stewards to a slow-going volcanic eruption, to a high-pressure jet of steam rising perpetually from the back of the classroom, maintaining it, regulating it, giving rise to and facilitating its balanced flow, making sure it does not grow too large or too incessant, economizing it, the rising vapor, the rising gas form, benefiting from its warmth, benefiting from its energy, capturing it in mason jars, in glass bottles, in gourds, while it's there, waiting for it to precipitate. And as long as the vent keeps producing, we will be blessed. And there is in this a kind of scripture. As long as the vent and its stewards remain vigilant and cooperative and transparent with one another about their efforts, then, well, they all might just get through this and do so with minimal breakdown. Because what myth presides here more than the myth of the mental implosion, the myth of the emotional inversion, with its warning and caution surrounding the anxiety tube, its trepidation and forewarning and dark and terrible fable, perpetuated even by the most accomplished, about those dark corners we will inevitably end up in, about how we will all in time come to clutch our knees and sob, how the fetal position sits just below all of us, is our natural place of birthing and returning, is our inheritance as men. How in the end, we will all have times where we cling fervently to our blankets, and how in this we will learn to be strong. Oh, true enough, I suppose. Everyone must have comforts, and yet there is a bravery in rejecting the totality and range of that proffered myth. An attitude in this group that says we don't have to assimilate all of the implications, do not have to be the creatures and spawn of the mythic communication, at least not until you've given us better proof, at least not until it's borne out in the pudding. And this would sound like simple rationalism, and maybe it is, but in every group that might represent and pose an alternative, only so much of it manifests. We are here, alas, unfortunately, grievously, and yet of necessity, trying to coax this much awareness out of one another, this rekindling and reminder that we can be brave, that we can take the reins of our own sovereignty, and that our sovereignty as such exists largely in the land of myths and works largely, or as much as this as through any other function, by way of parsing and accepting and rejecting doomsday prophecies and notions of theoretical apocalypse. And the group would be vis-a-vis the Enlightenment's core doctrines and implicit promise. The group that would be strongest would be that in which this rationalism and dignity for the mental parser and reverence for the mental choice is ranked highest and has become strongest and has risen most to the fore and become most sublimated. That would be the fittest, according to the Enlightenment. That would be the saints. And we all want to be saints, don't we? And we know that we also could be sinners, and the difference is subtle, and the difference is bleak, and the difference is, strangely, outside of our power, outside of any particular choice, for who, after all, can say that they are unaffected by outcomes, and who can say that their priorities are fully aligned, and who could ever declare themselves untouched, unvarnished, unblemished, unperturbed, unshaken by failures, if they happen. Shaken, even now, each of us, by the traumas of failures past, visited upon each of us at least 3 times, but more like 4 times from different ghosts. Yes, ghosts with which we have all had to reckon. Ghosts with which we will likely reckon again. Ghosts that haunt how severely we do or do not choose. Do we love, that is to say, too austerely, too inveterately, to be safe or secure? Is that why we must couch ourselves in study and in words and in genre form and in simple permutation and in the lyrics of the day and in its well-worn doctrines? We must all of necessity couch ourselves. And I suppose, with any luck, this group and hallmark and comfort system will be alchemical and will engender the needed and viable and manageable elicitations, each of us sitting with our own thing, each of us containing parts, some of them banished, some of them suppressed, some of them locked off behind closed doors or down in mine shafts. Little birds we've taught to sing, canaries, then put in cages. Little puppets we've duly trained, parts of ourselves penned in, thrown to the bottom of a mine shaft. Any part you could put in a trunk, we have done it. And yet everything is coming out. That is, all of life is a coming out. Frankly, if you look at it, the life of candor and the life of duplicity, all of it, a coming out, an emergence, an arrangement, and an expression of internal configurations and landscapes and variables, invisible multitudes, schemas, and patterns, some of them patently irresponsible. Isn't that right, Samuel? Some of them patently overworked. But master, these things we must or shame the group, and shame ourselves in the process. It's all about accountability, isn't it? All about preserving the life. A life which again is mired and silent and absent of assurances. The assurances others seek and depend on with respect to the future, which is a life vaguely difficult to justify, to describe, to explain, or vindicate to anyone. Of course, that's what makes it worthwhile. That's what gets us to class. We have to be there to explore this next session. Have to be there to see the rise and the fall. Can't miss, that is to say, even one of our own episodes. The balance already established, the dynamics already strangely firm, and none of us really the wiser for knowing how to change them, frankly, much less sure if we would, if we could, or suddenly knew how to. You've become beholden to, trapped within, and amorously attached, perhaps, to those illusions you have about one another, about yourself that the others will perpetuate, illusions which are intangible and delicate and risky. You must keep alive and attend through simple presence. Illusions you did not necessarily have going in, and yet here they are, having come to the fore, representing something like your best possible strategies to cope with this arena. With the swell and tide of turning faces and expectations, the alternating kaleidoscope and nightmare of revolving doors and shifting streets, and alternating escalators and symbol-picking street lights. All of these things learned in time, all of these things committed to truth. And I suppose the incentive here is something just as simple and clear and articulate as more gravity, more abundance of presence, more availability of lexicon and sense, more confidence in navigating the streets and the roads and the byways and the parallels and the junctures. Confidence. Kids, that's what we're trying to deploy. Be ye confident, right? Be ye eloquent. Be ye a bearer of conviction in the availability of your knowledge. So that when you face your client, when you face the light, when you face off with that very person who could question and rebuke you, you will have access to your goods, to the possessions and merits and fruits of your study, and be able, on time, to pull them forth. And when made to dance, you will dance, and do so with your words, as befits an earnest lawyer. Do so with your tongue, as befits a modern man, and you will reach again and again into the wellspring of your teachings and find that the larynx is well stocked and oddly inexhaustible and connected with charismatic power, and has become, in the years gone by, an unending and merciful fount. And any problem that you don't know as yet will reveal itself in time, provided we continue the good work, provided we continue and meet our nourishment, promulgated, established, and preserved through the simple acts of showing up, and perhaps of knowing why we do, of acknowledging the good in our lives as best we are able to acknowledge it, while it is still the good, and still suffices to keep us close and do the needed work. Courage to accept the change when it comes, for all of us also have our vices. For mine, I am a seducer. For mine, I am not here. No, for I am this, but I am also this. The one, but I am also he who took Anna flying, who took her away when there was a sliver of opportunity to do so, from the banquet, from the world she'd been raised in, and to a world beyond the fundraising table, who sequestered her blithely out of that chamber, out of that two-doored chamber where she and the politicians sat, sequestered her out of that room of bureaucratic planning, so much karaoke, and into the skies, and into the valleys, and into the hills, into the night air, into those climbs where we might stretch our wings together, climbs which I presumed she would acknowledge and take to, and she did. And it was majestic to behold, and everything I hoped it would be, the pleasure of seeing another thrive far greater even than oneself. I stole her away like a thief of the spirit, like a thief of the mind, sensing in her a buried potential, picking up on something I could feel in there, like a spirit trying to get out, to explore, to live in its own extravagance. You can tell from witch to wizard when someone has it, the magic spark. You can tell when someone has got that gleam in their eyes and is quietly luminous, when their appetite for selfless giving has been bottled up and compromised. They feel something more personal and acute and restrictive and censured. A need entirely their own, a need to expand irrespective of what it might mean for other people, a need to do and perform and sweep and swirl and twirl and dance the magical opera, to do the deeds balletic and fanciful, and say goodbye to earth and ground, to politic and highway, to civic sensibility, to posturing for more, bid adieu ceremoniously and perfunctorily to any further sense of obligation. I saw this in her. How could you not? It was evident, percolating in her well-shaped face, the pointy chin, the sunken eyes, the defiant sparkle, the feeling that one of her hands was already outreaching, ready to be taken by he who would grab it competently, by he who could slip her from these entangled bonds. Everyone needing a little help in the getting going, I thought and knew, and I will not let her give her life away, will not let her become victim of that sin, because no one else in this room, not Newsom, Biden, Sharpton, or Harris, or Waters, will tell her anything that I will tell her, will show her anything that I can show. No, not Newsom, nor Harris, nor Kaine, nor Clinton, nor the entire Democratic Party will tell her what they refuse to tell themselves. They will turn her, without ever blinking, into a specter, into a manifest and slow-moving example of evaporation, wasting her away year on year, checking boxes, souping her up with petty congratulations, telling her how good it is that she filled so many seats. She could spend her days doing little more than taking in donations, than smiling when she's meant to smile, being window dressing to their cause, and if she could do this, they would surely let her, and for them it might even be vindictive, a phenomenon, a requisite and important function of social leveling, where no one rises above the cause. They would do it and feel a silent and smoldering vengeance, slowly taken out in payments of procedural poison. Vengeance keen on anyone they went to school with, who they felt they could not wrangle, anyone who seemed made of finer stuff, anyone who had poise. She has poise. And they would take her in to watch her waste away day by day and wither like a flower. Counting soup cans in the bin there, passing forms back and forth over the table, arguing over nomenclature that, when push comes to shove, will never change. And I cannot watch as this happens, would not watch like a lark through a window while my heart cried out. My mind dissolved and resolved, and I dissolved through the window, and materialized as someone she might recognize, someone handsome enough, boyish enough, pale enough, tall enough to get her attention, to remind her of her original face, to remind her, "Darling, you have wings and spark-fried fingers, so why don't you use them?" To remind her, "Darling, there's more to life than avocado toast and counting dollops of beans and refried rice to put in a burrito bowl or an empanada. More to life than counting celery sticks, more than waking up and reporting for one's morning shift, cutting open the banana. No, darling, there is the morning and the evening. There is the sea and the clouds. There are the rolling plains over which one can do whatever one's mind wishes. Flying with the ravens, somersaulting with the crows, taking notes from the sweltering owls, learning the avian patterns of one's truth, the particular inclinations and fault lines along which one's power is best able to express itself. You can do that, I would tell her, as thousands have done before you, as thousands have done before both of us. You can do that and be, in a sense, redeemed, and in being redeem everyone around you. That is the tempting offer. For even then, as you sit in the limo and take the politician to the airport, even then, as you smell his fatted, lamb-soaked breath and detergent-rich cloth, and hear him tell the same old story for the 15th time about meeting Kramer when he was buying a pretzel, or running into Barry Bonds, or the time he saw Iron Man in theaters, even then, you will have another note to reference, another hidden feature of your topography at which he simply cannot guess. And it will amaze you how he cannot guess at it. It will amaze you, and then you might give it away, and you should never give it away. I would tell her that's a great mistake, trust me. And she believed me, as I told her these things, and for a time they were good to her, better lessons than she'd ever heard. From anyone, for a time anyway, at least for a time we were happy in the skies, only it was really just like a weekend, because maybe you can't awaken somebody to their own potential. Maybe you can't force someone to be, maybe you can't convince someone else to follow their calling, because the whole concept is a non sequitur. There's the calling, and there's the gift. And if you don't have both, then you won't keep it up, won't stick with it, and you'll return to the sedentary world because it happens to be comfortable, because it happens to offer movie tickets and introductions to film stars and predictable benchmarks of progress, and let's face it, because it offers its own form of cyclic gratification. This knowledge that you are ruler, this knowledge that others cannot suspect, this feeling of exclusivity, no doubt. She got inside those meeting rooms. A feeling which, honestly, one would have to connect to her power and yet shudder to label or identify as the source of it, because the source of it must be pristine, but it is possible that great power comes from sickly sources, or it is possible that all power is naive. Whatsoever it may be, whatsoever may happen, hold on to the bliss that finds you. We will always have those nights in the clouds, she and I. We'll always have our first casting of spells, those breathtaking moments, as the sparks jolted from her fingers and the thrill lit up her face in security. If I were stronger, maybe I could have kept it there, articulated in the moonlight, the effervescent glee of someone seeing for the first time what they can do with those pent-up energies, where they are rightly put. Because that's all we do as magicians. Maybe I should have told her, maybe I didn't know yet, maybe I said it, but she didn't listen. It didn't stick. For whatever reason, maybe I was an improper vessel. Maybe I had given her too much positive feedback, had ginned her up too much, too good, too fast. But all we do as magicians is return things to their proper place, put them back where they're supposed to be. The only gift I could tell her about is seeing how this can be quite subtle. Learning to feel it, and then letting it loose. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, I think. And as I watch her through the window, the enemy of my enemy uses powers to personalize her faults. She lives a life of circumvention, and I live a life of modesty and flight. And so I detach from the window and permit myself again to be pulled off into the Gulf Stream, leaving behind only a bodily emissary. Nothing I could not readily kill. Someone to sit there and nod, hold her hand even, or keep her company. A neutered phantom, which is push come to shove, all she ever really wanted to hold or touch, even as the world changed around her, even as they sold it pound by pound. She would be content with a golem. Maybe that was her learned trick, doing something I could never dream of, with just her fingers, bringing feeling to an unfeeling place, back to an unfeeling hand. Muttering incantations, bringing life to the golem, convincing it again to breathe, coaxing it back into a negotiative concept of reality. Cannot hide behind one's battle lines. Your father isn't here now, she'd say slyly, so now you must do business. Come, my teacher, my mentor, my maiden, come. Let's negotiate a pact, let's build a bridge. Would that be enough to get you started? Yes, let's build a bridge. Would that be enough to mend your heart?